Hey developers, so today I'm going to show you something fun. We are going to look at React server components. I'm going to take a look at it, take a whirl of the demo, the experimental demo that was just released, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it. So stay all the way to the end. Hey, and if you don't know, my name is Eric. I am a full stack software developer, but I also really like Vue.js, React, Angular. I like all the front end frameworks, and I'm a big fan of the back end frameworks, including Node and Express. So if you guys like those type of topics, make sure you click that subscribe button. So let's just jump into this. Oh yeah, and let's have a quick word from our sponsor first. Hey everyone, I just want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Algoexpert, which is the best place on the internet to prepare for your technical interviews. So this is a technical interview prep site. They have over 110 hand-picked questions. They have over 70 hours of video explanations. If you're looking for those data structures, you're confused on them. I know, first time I was studying for data structures, I was confused. This site is it. They have a data structures crash course. They have over 9 languages you can do your questions in. They have code execution environment. So they have a ton of things you can use to really nail that algorithms interview. And this is much better than those sites that just list out algorithm questions. This actually explains what you should know and how to solve them with a video explanation. So it's much better than those. And also I would say, check out Systems Expert if you're looking for those system design interviews. Both of them go hand to hand. So check out Algoexpert. I will put a link in the description below. I will also put it in the comments so you can check it out. It's well worth it if you're looking to pass that algorithm interview. Thanks again to Algoexpert. Okay, so just recently, React has released an introduction to a zero bundle size React server components. So this is an experimental React feature to add server-side components in your React app. And as you may have known, I actually just recently did a video on Next.js. I thought this would be a good follow-up video just to talk about what I feel about this, because I do primarily Vue.js, and I did Ember.js way back in the day. But I just kind of want to take a look at this and poke around it. And also, I want to make sure that I give credit where credit is due. I actually got a lot of ideas by watching other people's videos. I'll put a bunch of links in the description below for all these different resources. So if you want to go to those resources, feel free to click on them. There's some really great information coming out for React server components. So this will be just an introduction to what I see and how you can get up and running just to kind of play around with it. The first thing you want to do if you're interested in React server components is to check out the blog that was just released on December 21st by Dan Abramoff, Lauren Tan, Joseph Savona, and Sebastian Markabage on introducing zero bundle size React server components. And it has like this 55-minute video where Lauren and Dan create this app, this experimental app, which you can actually download and test yourself. And they explain the idea behind this server-side components, these React server components, or RSC you may see in some tweets that people are talking about. And so since then, we've actually seen a lot of articles about it. Adi Osmani did a really good article about it. So did swyx. Sean, he actually created a whole dev.to article about it. But you may be thinking, okay, what is this? So I'm going to kind of paraphrase some of these resources that I'm seeing. They're an experimental upcoming feature of React that lets you render components only on the server. This has a few implications. So RSCs have zero client JS bundle impact, so they can greatly reduce your overall bundle size. Despite only rendering on the server, they don't have to be static. You can refetch server components, and the server will stream updates down without losing state. You can directly query your database inside a server-side component without setting up GraphQL API endpoints. So you'll find out that React actually created these wrappers around fetch and DB queries that you can use in this demo, which is really cool. So it helps solve the problem, and I've had this happen before, where as your app grows larger and larger, your bundle size grows larger and larger. So they solve this for a good user experience, cheap maintenance, and fast performance in React apps. There are multiple benefits. However, the opportunity here is to greatly reduce production React app bundle sizes while not sacrificing modern app-like user experiences. So you're probably thinking from listening to this that this sounds very similar to like Next.js, or in the Vue ecosystem, Nuxt.js. So doesn't Nuxt and Next use server-side rendering to create very fast components. And I think Lauren which helped create this demo, had a really great explanation about this. That, see, SSR of client.js apps is an illusion. You render your JavaScript on the server into HTML. You serve that HTML to your client so it appears to have fast startup, but you will have to wait for your JS to reach the user before anything can be interactive. That's called the hydration part of it. After hydration, server-side rendering can be used again. It's typically only used for initial loads. We can refetch React server components as many times as we like. React server components are diff, but completely complementary to SSR because we render into an intermediate format. We can merge that server tree with the client tree without losing client state. When used together, you could first render into an intermediate format, then have your SSR render that into an HTML so startups can still be fast. So your startup can still be fast. But this time, your JS bundle is going to be much smaller. And in actuality, when you use something like Next or Nuxt, on that first initial load, that's where the server will render the web page for you, and then it'll be really quick for the user because they won't notice it. It'll just pop up right away. But in the background, like the JavaScript bundles are downloaded and they get hydrated. So it's kind of an illusion of what's really happening. While these React server components are actually completely rendering on the server and then being sent back, and they can be used more than once. You know, typically in a Nuxt app, and I can't say for sure in a Next app, I believe it's the same way. After the initial page load, after everything's loaded, you're basically then using a single page app at that point. You know, all your every time you're going to different routes, I mean, it's just loading all the JavaScript that's already there, so it doesn't need to call back to the server. But this is a little different, which I think is interesting because this is certainly a problem a lot of people have with their bundle sizes. So I thought what would be kind of interesting is if we take a look at the demo that was created, this experimental demo put out there. And like I said, I'll put the links for all this in the description below. They give you actually a step-by-step guide. It's really simple. Probably the hardest part is obviously you'll need to have Node.js 14.9.0 or greater. LTS is a good choice. You do need to just do a git clone on the repo and then do an npm install or npm start. You can even set it up with Docker if you want. And then you have to create a database and get Postgres up and running. If you don't have Postgres, there's some really good guides on it. I actually am using a Windows box here. I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux. I actually already had Postgres installed. The one thing I did have problems with is I was able to get into the pSQL Postgres console to enter these commands in. It basically creates the new Notes API database, and it creates a new role called Notes Admin, and then wants you to log in to Notes Admin. I actually had problems logging in. I just logged into my root user after I created the user, and then I just created the tables, and everything worked great. If you need to go in and actually make changes, you can go into the credentials.js file here. I have my VS Code open. This is the actual cloned app here after doing the npm install. And I just went ahead and just changed the port because I have a different port running in Postgres. You can also just change the database or username. So if you want, you can just make the changes here in the credentials file. Also, after you do that, it kind of gives you some notes, and then it gives you a couple interesting things to try. But I wanted to show you what it does after it started. So after you cloned it, you have your Postgres database created. I just did the npm run start, npm start here, and it's running my nomon. So basically has like a Express server that's running in the background, and this will bring up this. This is kind of what it looks like out of the box here, and you can click new. You can type in like, I know, test example, and you can have some information here. I think you can have some markdown inside here, and you can certainly do some tests on it. And if you hit done, it saves it. So we can do like another one, test 456, 1, 2, 3, and then done. And okay, so we have a couple different examples here. If you refresh it, obviously it's being saved in the database and it brings it back up. Now this is kind of hard. It's really hard to kind of see what's happening if this is client side or server side. So it's useful to look at the code itself. So inside the source folder, we have all our files, and you can see something interesting here. Some of them are labeled with .client, and some of them are labeled .server. So typically the ones that are .server actually are created on the server, and the ones that are .client are run on the client, which is very interesting. Let's say here we have this notelist.server, and you can see here it's inside the file. It actually has this DB So this is being imported from db.server, which has this new db command that's grabbing this pool from React PG. So this is one of those new React wrappers around some database code to get to talk to Postgres. So this is a new React experimental library, and obviously these are all experimental, so you would want to be careful about using them. You can see here it's actually doing a DB query right inside. It's doing the DB query right inside here. So you actually are doing database queries inside your React components server side. So here's a select star statement, which grabs the search text, which is passed in as a prop into note list, which is kind of cool. Like, I've never seen something like this done before. It kind of gives an example here. It says example here. We don't encourage this in real apps. There are far safer ways to access data in real applications, but it's really cool that you can do this in here, and you can obviously probably think of a better way of handling it. And then once it grabs this notes data, you can just map through it and display it on the screen here. And so all the notes are on there, and it has the sidebar note as well. That's kind of a really neat feature that right away we're able to see we can use server-side code inside our React app using just the .server extension. We can also convert one of these to, let's say, from a server to a client. So let's do that. Let's see if we can convert this note.server.js file to a client file. So it's ran on the client. And we could see right here, if we look inside our source right here, and then go to Webpack and go to the dot and source, we could see we don't have note.server.js, which makes sense because this is being run on the server side and not the client side. So if we make our changes here, hypothetically, it should show up here in the source as a client file that's being bundled in and returned back to the client. Right now, essentially, it's being run on the server, and then that server is being shipped, the information is being shipped back to the client. So this note file here is essentially a way that it does a query for the selected one that you select here on the left-hand side, and then it grabs the title and it shows you the note preview on the right-hand side. So it does all that. So hypothetically, we should be able to not run this on the server, but run it on the client. So what the first thing to do is, the way we need to do is go into this note server, and do a rename. I'm just going to rename it to client. And then it's asking if I want to update the imports, but I'm going to do this manually. So I'm going to do no here. It basically crashed my app, by the way. So if you go in the app server.js, this is where essentially it creates everything for you. It's the whole app. So in the app server, there's this note. And right down here is basically also there's Suspense, which we'll take a look at in a moment. But it has this note component here, which passes in the selected ID and is editing. So I need to change the name of this from note.server to note.client, because that's the new name of it. And then in the note client, to convert this over to a client file instead of server, I need to get rid of a few things. It actually has a few imports that aren't being used. So I'm going to comment out the read file. I'm going to comment out the DB, and then I noticed, actually, swyx noticed that the date.fns file actually can't be run client side; it has to be run server side. And then I believe the last one is where we're using format right here. I'm just going to delete this and put today. Not quite true, but actually, it is true. So that should be it. I'm going to run npm start. Can't really see it, but I'm in the way. So I'm going to run npm start, and that should start the server. And if it works correctly, it shouldn't give me any errors. Actually gave me, I'm not going to worry about that unhandled promise rejection warning, but I'm going to restart. Okay, so it's working. I'm looking at my console now. Let me clear my console. I don't have any errors. Cool, so I'm still seeing the preview, but let's look at that source folder again and go to Webpack, the dot here, source. All right, so now I do see the note.client.js file right here. So before we weren't seeing it. I don't know if you could see that. I can make it a little bigger. The note.client.js JS file is being shown up this time, where before when it was a server, it wasn't being displayed. So now this is being shipped to the client. So cool. So it's working as expected, and now we've basically converted a server to a client, and we can certainly switch it back. But to make this easier, I'm just going to use a little git magic here. npm start, and that's going to go ahead and restart the server, and it should be back to server to be running in the server. And we can see here we have this note.client.js. If I refresh it, it's still working. And if I look at my webpack and dot source, now it's no longer being listed, so we no longer have it in there, which is really cool. So we have been able to switch our bundle from one to the other. Neat. So another thing is they actually have these, you may have noticed here, there's actually Suspense built in. And if you're looking at a Vue app, by the way, Vue does have a form of Suspense too, and it's a way to wait until everything is done loading on the component. And before, you can actually have fallbacks if things are loading the component, like you have an await, an asynchronous function and it needs to finish before you do something. You can have like this loading spinner. There's the same thing you can do here. So they actually built in some examples. So in this note file right here, I believe there is a fetch right here. So if you add in this fetch, it's essentially just a fake function, a fake endpoint that just waits 3 seconds and then returns. So I'm going to save it here and then see if we can see it. I'm going to kind of close this or minimize this. If I refresh, nothing here. But if I click here, you can see the skeleton view. So this is essentially Suspense working. It's magic. So there's a fallback in here. If we look back at that app server file, here you have this fallback here, Suspense to the noteless skeleton. So that works as you expect it on the server side as well as the client side. So that doesn't break there. One thing I noticed too is after it loads, it basically caches it locally. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's a bug or not, but it happens on the first time it loads it. So if you load it, you get the skeleton. And same thing here. And they actually added it in a couple places. You could see here we have the Suspense surrounding the note block, but also the note list. So I'm going to get rid of the fetch here, and I'm going to open the note list up, the note list server. And we have, once again, we have this fetch here. We can uncomment it out. That adds a 3-second fetch. And now we should see a skeleton around this note list here. So if I refresh it, yeah, so you can see the skeleton here every time we refresh it, which is really cool. There's that 3-second delay that they added in. Another thing I want to show you is creating your own server, own file for the server. So I'm going to create one, comp.server.js. I guess we can call it whatever we want. And then inside here, I'm going to create just a really basic component. Export default function comp info. And this is one of the things I saw in the live with Swyx. They actually had deeply nested components, and you kind of see what it's doing. So I'm going to return here. I'm going to create a second component. I'm going to call it comp2 and export. Actually, we don't want to export. I'm just going to call it function comp2. It's going to receive a prop called, I don't know, info2. And then we're going to return it with an h1. I'm going to add some of my own styles to this. I'm going to put a z-index of 2424, color blue. I believe this is how you do it. And that'll have info2. And then I want to return here, we're going to return this component, which will have an info2, and we'll pass in info +1. And now we can essentially add it to our app somewhere. Okay, we're going to put it in the sidebar note. So I'm going to import comp from comp.server. And then I'm going to put it in right, I think we're going to put it in between the client sidebar note, maybe above the header. So we'll do comp. And then we need to pass in our info. I guess we'll put in 1. And we'll refresh it here. and I'll stop and restart it. Oops, actually I found an issue. It says I can't import a .server file from a non.server file. So I'm going to just call it comp.js then. And I'm going to go back to my sidebar note and my sidebar note, and I'm going to change the import, this one right here, from comp to comp. But it basically be run server side. I'm going to save it. I'm going to restart my server to see if it works. Oops, I actually have too many brackets here. Let me refresh this. Okay, so now I have this 2 here, and I just wanted to show you, if we go into the, so we can see here we added in the sidebar note, we had it into this client sidebar note as inside our children there. So if we go to the client sidebar note, and we just do a console log children, and we take a look at our console, which I'm going to clear out real quickly. You can see here we have 2 notes, and you can look at it and you can see here this is actually being sent down in this kind of unusual way here with this source. We have props here, we have children, it's 2. It actually just added 1 to it. So that's a little interesting. And also if we go back to the source and we look at our Webpack and we look at here into our source here, the component that we created isn't showing up in part of the bundle either, which is really cool. So we don't actually have it showing up in here as well. So that's very unusual and really cool, because now we're running it server side and it's being rendered for us, and it's deeply nested and it's being fetched here inside this component. All right, so that's all I wanted to show you guys today. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in server-side client, React server-side components, React server components, download the demo, start playing around with it like I just did. Let me know in the comments what you think. This is very interesting. I wonder what the next move on the Vue team and the Angular team, what they'll be doing. Will they be adding in this type of pure server conventions into a framework? I definitely think someone like Nuxt, the Nuxt project, could add something like this in. They already have. I think they would be really this is something they can easily add in. Also, I think of libraries like Remix, which is a React library that does something very similar with having components on the server side. Wonder how they're going to react to something like this. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Appreciate it. Thanks.